He's currently working at a New York City startup, educational startup, and he's working with Famous and Meteor. And so today he's going to come and talk to us about Famous, and hopefully a little bit of Meteor. So Andrew, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, just a little bit more about me. I worked at a couple startups here in San Diego, one with Heather called the Control Group, and had a lot of fun there. And also worked on social startup, logistics startup, and a journalism startup. So, and the later sort of half of my career has been in working with full stack JavaScript development and how that applies to different universal platform development in terms of like mobile, web, and what have you. So so Famous kind of came across my desk like a year and a half ago or so, and kind of blew my mind because they're doing things that I never thought were possible with JavaScript in the web and the browser. And so I'll start the presentation with what I saw first and their sort of first demo that made them popular. Let's see here.
It looks like it's on, but I didn't see it.
Doesn't sound like it's on.
Usually there's something on the screen.
Is it very hot behind the projector?
No.
Nice. Cool, yeah, and while it's starting up, I'll give you a little bit more background into, sorry, I'm a little tired. I was on a plane flight from New York all day. And, okay, cool. Will it get a little bit brighter than that? Is it? Okay. Cool. So this is sort of the first large demo that they came out with that kind of.
That was John. That wasn't you.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, it looks like the signal keeps dropping off of that. Jiggle it.
Jiggle it?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the first demo that I saw, and a lot of people. How many of you guys have heard of Famous or seen demo? You've probably seen this demo. So this is the first demo they came out with, and it's kind of blew my mind. Like, is this WebGL, or how are they achieving this performance in 3D with JavaScript without something like WebGL, without using a native framework? And so the first thing you do is you check the source and see like how are they achieving this, and it's DOM. So then you have to wonder why can't a jQuery plugin achieve anywhere near this performance? Like you have a jQuery plugin that does 2D animation and it still feels a little like pretty shitty in the browser, especially on the mobile web. So I'll tell you a little bit about what Famous is doing and how they're achieving this and how they started out. So Famous started out as an application company, and they had a lot of influence from gaming. A lot of their people came from gaming, and one actually came from Facebook. He was the head of Facebook's whole mobile department from the time they were a team of 4. So what he witnessed is this team of 4 growing to like 6 different teams for each one developing the same app on different platforms. And being frustrated, he left Facebook and joined and kind of chilled out for a couple years, and then joined Famous because he was so excited about the technology and how they're going to use JavaScript to solve this problem of not having to develop one app for each platform. And so, he's not the only one excited about this. Recently, they have taken in $25 million in additional funding because a lot of different companies like Intel, Mozilla, etc., all see the same potential of using, if we can use the web to develop one app for every platform, the potential of saving developer hours is huge. So that's sort of why it's the most well-funded front-end JavaScript framework ever by far. And yeah, how they're achieving this performance is, how many of you guys use CSS3 properties? Like, there's certain properties in CSS3 that use the GPU if you apply them, and one of them is matrix 3D. And so the reason the browser can't achieve this sort of smooth animation with all these different textures or surfaces is because it's not using the GPU. And so why can like an N64 have this, you're playing an N64 from years ago and it has way better performance than the browser that we're all developing for today? It kind of blows my mind. So what Famous set out to do is build a framework around using the GPU to do what it does best, and what it does is move textures around in space, and it's really good at that. So everything you do in Famous, at its core, is using a matrix 3D property, which in turn turns these divs or surfaces into textures in the GPU. So now you're getting a video game level performance in the DOM, using the DOM. And one other thing that they do to optimize this performance at the core level is, say you want to animate something from A to B, and you want to, or from 0 to 1,000. It's going to hit in JavaScript, it's going to hit every little interval in between. And to display that in the browser, it's not optimized for a screen, because the screen refresh rate isn't infinite, and your eye can't even see that fast. So what they do is they say, well, 60 frames per second, let's batch these animations and all the animations on the screen in this matrix of numbers, and then refresh it at 60 frames per second. So now we have the GPU optimization and the 60 frames per second optimization, which allows us to do insane things like a recent demo that they've had of rendering 5 million particles. Something, as JavaScript developers, we could never imagine last like a year ago, you know? So at its core, it's using CSS Matrix 3D, but to a Famous developer, you're not. They've built a core engine, a render engine, a physics engine. So you could technically develop anything as elaborate as this to a video game to a 3D movie if you wanted. But as web developers, that's not really that useful for us, because we're not going to be making, I mean, we could be, but generally we're going to be making 2D applications with the similar elements like this. You're going to have a scroll view, you're going to have a carousel in a typical web app. So what Famous also did is they said, okay, a few years ago, we have this awesome engine, we have this awesome physics engine, and how are we going to make this accessible to web developers and JavaScript developers? And what they did is they started making components, such as the scroll view. So in Famous, you don't use the web browsers. I don't use this native scroll. I use the Famous scroll, which you can completely control, and it's all based on physics and physics properties. And so if I want to have, say, this bounce in the application, and it's mostly meant to mock a native app. So if I'm using this if I'm using a web view in Cordova, and I just have a typical browser scroll, when I get to the top, it's just gonna do it's not gonna do that bounce, it's just gonna sit there, and the sort of motion when I push it through space, it's gonna stop. It's not gonna feel like a physical object sliding through space. So what Famous allows you to do with this is one component called the scroll view, which you're going to use all the time in your app. It allows you to control each little property. Such as friction, drag, edge grip, like how it dampers, how it paginates. It exposes the developer to things that they wouldn't have in just the typical browser's scroll view. And they've also done this with several other things. Go into the docs. Well, yeah, their website is not very good. So, one thing that is good about this website is Famous University. One of the best learning experiences I've ever had learning a framework or technology is using Famous University, and just Famous in general. They've really set themselves up to be accessible. They have a open loft and workspace in San Francisco. You can just go in, you can work and talk to the core Famous developers. They're very accessible on IRC, and Famous University is awesome. It walks you through. Walks you through each step of learning in a interactive environment. So you can sit here and say, you can learn the basic elements of Famous all the way up to how do I develop an entire app in Famous. And there's different integrations. Angular, Meteor, React, they all have their well-built integrations with all these different technologies. And, okay, so more hardcore into Famous. As a Famous developer, what do you actually look at, and how do you create these insane 3D animations? The basic unit in Famous is a surface. And a surface, in terms of DOM, is just a div with 3D. If I want to look at, say, one of these, say, one of view source. It's an iframe. I don't want a view source. So you see this is just a div. It's a surface, but in DOM terms, it's just div with a matrix 3D CSS property on it, which gives it the GPU rendering. You can see it's just animating all these different numbers in this 3D matrix that give it its sort of skew and positioning on the page. So that's a basic unit. From there, you can build views, which can contain a bunch of different surfaces. You can put in different layouts, which can be. Here, I'll use an example that I've made actually. Let's see. Yeah, this is not very responsive to this size either, but so don't worry about that. I wonder if I can you adjust this to a larger resolution? No. Cool. So this will be probably easier if I explain it this way. So this is a famous app, super basic famous ed tech app. And what it does is it captures artifacts of students in a classroom and it captures them learning. And it allows them to share to different teachers or their parents, etc. And that's the basic gist of the app. But so how this looks like a basic app, but you have 3 different surfaces here. Well, you have sort of a grouping of different surfaces here. This is a surface, this is a surface, this is a surface. And the reason those elements are different surfaces rather than just one div is because if I want to animate those in, or like have them pop in, or like 3D rotate in, anything you want to do as one block, you want to, if you want to animate anything individually, you want to have that be in at least a surface, if not a view. This is a surface, and these 3 elements are surfaces, all in a page, which is also a surface. And this is using a famous core layout called flexible layout. And what it does is it gives you a header, a footer, and, well, they have a header and footer layout. This flexible layout, you can add as many different divisions as you want. And I'm going to show you how the code looks for that. Yeah, sorry, this is in CoffeeScript. Not my favorite language or whatever, but my buddy I work with wanted me to use it. So this is how you define a flexible layout in Famous. And one thing you can do is right off the bat, you can do directions. So this is a direction 1, which is basically a vertical layout. And what the ratios here do is anything in the first node of this layout is a fixed value. Anything in Famous that you want to use like a fixed value is, they use the property called, well, just a binary true. And then and then if I wanted to do, say, if I wanted to add like another dimension into this, I could add like another 1, which is, then those are split 50-50. Or if I added 2, then it's split 50, yeah. And here, let me give you an example of how that looks. Flexible layout is a famous core class, if you will, or component that you can use in your designs. And let me show you in the, it's something I use all the time. Just as a basic app, you're gonna want to have some sort of structure, some sort of layout, and more often than not, you're gonna have a header, you're gonna have a footer, and they do have a layout for that. But the flexible layout is more keen to, like, if you want to do animations, like when you scroll down or scroll down, the header animates up and kind of contracts in a lot of apps you see. Flexible layout allows you to do that a lot better than.
So is the flexible layout like a parent tree that maintains the other set of layouts?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's basically just just like you said. Let's see. And what they're doing is they're just pushing surfaces into that layout. Let me see if I can give an example.
Is it just the duration?
Which okay. So how you get views into a flexible layout is just Yeah, they have this array of surfaces or views. A view is just a surface with that contains other surfaces. And what they're doing here is they're creating this array of surfaces with different properties and different background colors, and they're pushing in. And then how you say what views come into this flexible layout is a sequence from function that the parameter is the array of surfaces.
Is this something that you would set up like after you're rendering a template, or is this something that's like occurring over time?
This is it actually sequence from actually watches that array. So if I wanted to, you can actually throw in. It watches it over time, so it does go on.
So I just have to instantiate like anyone I can instantiate, and you give it to it, it's gonna know how to handle it.
Yeah, exactly. If you can do set ratios, because it's going to be missing one of the ratios if you add a new view to that array. So what you can do is set ratio after you do that, after you add another view into the sequence, and then it'll adapt after you do the set ratio. So, and that ratios is just this array that I was kind of explaining, which controls how it all kind of comes together and the different widths.
Is that animated when you choose spacing?
Yeah, it does. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna. Thanks for pointing that out. Let's see here. So you can also do a transition property, which you can do anything from a spring, like a physics spring, which is pretty cool, to a set of curves, or you can define your own transitions. I created a package called Celestial, which allows you to manage your own transitions and views and layouts, and sort of ties everything together. And I'll show you a little bit about that. Yeah, we're actually using Cordova in this education app, and we can Cordova you can put it into a lot of different platforms.
You're also using Meteor.
We're using Meteor. We also have a desktop app, and so we have a desktop app which is Meteor on the front end and obviously on the back end, and this app is solely on the client side in Cordova, and it basically does a request. Meteor is all through this WebSockets and DDP, and that's how they exchange data between the client and the server. So this app just connects to the DDP WebSocket of our desktop app and exchanges data. So we have one server running all of our client-side applications, which side note about Meteor is they've actually now brought Cordova into the core of Meteor. So you can just do Meteor add platform iOS, Meteor add platform Android, and then when you do a Meteor build, you get a web app and all your mobile apps sort of in one. It's kind of bringing all these different platforms into this one app. And what's cool about that is I can define, obviously I don't want to push out all this famous code that's for mobile to the desktop, and I don't want all the desktop code to go to my mobile clients. So what Meteor allows you to do, or will in the next couple months, is define specific clients, and then those clients can share code, or they can have like their individual code. So I can share a function between my desktop and mobile app, but I can have the unique set of code that gets actually pushed to the clients. And that's and you can also share between, one of the big things about Meteor is sharing a function between the desktop, or sorry, between the server and the client. And that comes most in handy when you're dealing with data and how to manipulate data. A lot of times your models you see on your server are also, that data is going to be on your client, so you want to have similar models, and Meteor is really cool at allowing you to for code reuse. It's awesome. So yeah.
So you mentioned models.
Mm-hmm.
Is the controller, is that a class made from Famous?
So I was going to show you, this is just a quick package I made to, one side note is there's a thing called render controller, which handles how do we transition between this layout or this view and this layout and this view. And what Famous came up with is something called a render controller. And what that does is you define an in transition and out transition, and overlap is just is it overlapping? And so that's about as far as it goes with managing transition between views. And sort of the limit I found is, well, one, you don't have, the limit I found is one, you don't have a way to say, I want this view or this view. You kind of have to build that on top of the render controller. So render controller is more of like a low-level tool you'll eventually be using just to do transitions between like parts of your layout. Such, yeah.
So if like, for instance, like traditional route controller
Mhm.
render, so you're saying that with the render controller, you can't, like that flow is a curve, you can't
No.
have a specific view.
Yeah, you can't like say, give me a specific view. It's kind of like up to you and whatever framework you're using. I think they're trying to like limit it in the fact that most frameworks have a sort of a route controller. And
Is that why you're seeing like the Angular Vegas integration?
yeah, exactly. So if you're using Angular and Famous, you're using Angular for most of the higher level controls in the actual app, and Famous just for the front end interaction. And Meteor, I didn't really like Meteor's. There's a router package that I didn't really like as much, so I just developed this one quickly, and it allows me to define these transitions. So I just sort of self-define like a slide, and Famous has something called transitionable transform, and they also have something called a transform. And what you can do is set these different translates. It's sort of like low-level animating that you can kind of play around with. Set rotation, set translate, set scale, and this is something you can use to animate divs around. And I use this on just for the pure sort of these different transitions. See these transitions between layouts, and this is again just a flexible layout with a true header surface, and then this is a scroll view with surfaces. And on mobile, you can kind of get this like native feel if you're using it, where you can drag up and get this bounce. And you see how there's, number one, this is where I reached the limit of a render controller. A render controller can animate the entire view, but it can't do, I want to do I have two different views, one in the header and one in this scroll view, and I want to animate them both. I want to have that cool kind of like drop down effect and this slide to the left. So what I'm doing there is setting up my own custom layouts using basically just two different render controllers. So I have a header render controller and then a body render controller. And then I'm using the transitions I defined to animate. I'll show you how I actually am using these animations. For some reason, I think this is an old code base. second, I think it might be on the wrong repo. Maybe this one. Well, nevertheless, so basically how I'm using it is I define these transitions and directions in Celestial, which is a little platform I made, a little framework, and then I can say, okay, I want to have this layout slide in while this one flips out, and I can have the, this is an older version, but in the new one I can have I can have as fine-grained as header in, header out, and then body in, body out. And you can do that as many levels as you want. So you could have a body with another part of it called body left or whatever. And I could have each one have their own different transition. And I think the idea of transitions and animations in at least mobile is what makes you think of something as cool as like Instagram or Tinder has cool animations, or any of these modern apps. It's really the feel of the transition between views that gives you that really cool modern experience. And so I think it's important to be able to be as fine-grained as possible with your transitions. And Famous really gives you the tools to do that. And I just sort of built more tools on top of that to manage these different animations. But let me go into scroll view. Scroll view is going to be huge because a lot of your views are going to be either like a grid layout or a scroll layout if you're dealing with a lot of data. And let's see. And there's also something, I'll just kind of go off on tangents when I see a piece of code that might be interesting. The container surface is basically just a div that is solely for the fact of overview hidden, so it contains whatever's inside of it. And I use that to wrap the scroll view so that you don't have these elements scrolling like into the header or into other views. And scroll view is super easy to define. I'm just using default parameters, nothing there. And then you'll see this sequence from, just like you do in a layout. So I'm pushing surfaces, which are these just divs with buttons in them. And I can, again, add a new surface at any time to the scroll view, and I can control how that animates in. Here as like a new surface comes in, it sort of animates up. So since this is in Meteor, if someone was on the desktop management app and added a section into this classroom, it would then just animate up in real time right into this view, which is yeah, totally. So I made that dynamic in this. Let me go on GitHub really quick because this is old code. Oh yeah, so I have a default duration that's in this Celestial package I made. But you can, for instance, some animations you don't obviously want 400 milliseconds, so you can do, I've sort of abstracted all this, but.
Are you like, is it like an animation queue, or do you have to wait for one to finish the next one, or do they all occur, like how do you make it occur at the same time?
In the platform that I made, or in Famous in general, or?
Just kind of in general, like, I mean, all I'm saying is like, it seems like on some instances the animation is correct, the header pulls in and the coding comes at the same time. But then on the other one, you dive deeper in,
Yeah.
like the header comes down, then something else.
Yeah, so in Famous, obviously you can control anything to the extent of that you want, like, you know. But in this package that I made, you can, each animation you can have, I could have, say, if I wanted the body to slide in, I could have that duration. You can define a duration of, like, say that could be 800, or I could, or in JavaScript you could have.
I guess what I'm getting at is like the fact they're in concert. Is that because you have the header and the body defined with one transition?
Yeah, that's yeah, they're in. Yeah, that's exactly. Right.
Okay.
I could just have the header do it, or I could have, you can control it to whatever it's set.
But then from there you can do time to determine like which one's gonna finish first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And then I have like hooks set up, so I need to break this out a little bit, but I have these different hooks. Like, this is how I define my layouts. I have a base layout that just has menu that can slide in, and then your base app. And then I have a header footer layout, which is just an abstract of a flexible layout. And then I have what I just came up with is just called views, which can be like the welcome or the dashboard you saw. And then I have these sub-views, which are the body and the header. And then I can have, I've created like hooks, which are on render or during transition, or different hooks where you can call other things to happen.
How does that occur? Like an event?
Yeah, it's just an event that I'm emitting after the transition. So, yeah.
So these are all, looks like they're building a single page application.
These, yes. Yeah, there's a single page.
Is this, okay, are there different issues that might be, if you try to build an application that's multiple pages? Or
I would say that's sort of outside the scope of famous, but.
well, when you're doing transitions, sometimes.
Oh, if you're doing
like
transitions.
in jQuery mobile, there's a whole slew of things that you have to understand in order, you know, the differences between a single page application versus multiple pages. And
Yeah,
so
totally.
it depends on how it works. So I was just kind of curious.
I've
You
never
have the same
really,
type of
I've never
things.
even had to face the problem of trying to do a multi-page application transition, or how I would do that. But yeah, everything that I'm doing lately has been single page. So.
So what type of, what is famous best suited for? Is it mainly just what, the 3D animations? Like
Why would you use famous rather than something like jQuery?
Yeah.
So the reason is this performance benefit that you get. If you want to develop a web app for mobile, this is where they're focused right now. Is web developers like us, JavaScript developers, want to build mobile apps. They want to build for every platform. And you want to get the same performance that these native developers are getting. And so right now, if you're using jQuery and Cordova, you're going to have this sort of like static page. It's not going to feel like a native app. The animations when you're scrolling, how things slide in, you're not getting that 60 frames per second animation that you can get with something native. And so what Famous gives you is a tool set that any native developer would die to have. And it's really easy to use, and it gives you the performance that you need. So it is a bit of a, I'd say there's a curve. There's a curve if you're trying to convert your app to Famous. Kind of all has to be in Famous, and then so you have to sort of subscribe to Famous. And so I took the plunge. There was a lot of like things along the way that are kind of like a headache. But once you get there and you kind of get it, then it's really cool the things you can achieve with Famous.
So I can see how you get to like you have a view, rendering, transition, and kind of this experience. How are you handling your data? Are you doing models in Famous?
No. So all of the data is sort of outside the scope of Famous. So whatever you do with your data, I'm using Meteor. You could use whatever. You can write your own data layer or whatever you want to do. But the extent of which that data becomes into the DOM, into the view, you're in a famous app, you're never actually interacting. You're never calling jQuery to interact with the DOM to put 7 different students in a div. Those students would then be surfaces, and when that data becomes, that array becomes an array of surfaces, that's when Famous sort of takes over and says, how are we going to display this data? And you can, and you can do that to the extent of something like D3, where you can use D3 with Famous, and kind of becomes cool.
So, I mean, I guess the right idea from kind of being lost is, how does it ultimately, like, how does it do the changes with the DOMs? Like, are you via Famous view, are you like calling an element?
How does that view eventually
Yeah,
get
how
into
do you
the DOM?
actually set like the value? Like, if you receive data, and that data is changing.
Yeah.
He's using Meteor for this app. He's using Meteor to.
So I'll give you an example.
Meteor re-rendering?
Yeah, Meteor controls the re-rendering and the real-time aspects of the, how, like, when a data changes on the back end, the Meteor technology gets that to the front end, obviously, and then what I'm doing is,
Real-time data binding.
Yeah.
It's already bound.
yeah,
Where you set up that binding to bind to,
the view.
to Stadium.
Yeah, so this, there's a thing in Meteor called tracker.autorun. It used to be deps.autorun. You guys have used Meteor before? And what that does is any reactive property or data element inside this autorun, I'm actually switching this out. Autorun is sort of a general, anything inside of this, rerun it if the data changes or a reactive property changes. You can do anything down to, if you do an observed changes, then you can do different things if they're removed or added, which I'm kind of getting into now. But so, this is a mini Mongo query in the client, which then turns into, eventually through PubSub turns into getting data through the server. But this query is, well, that's a count query, but this query defined is reactive. So anytime that changes on the server, Meteor knows that I'm running this query inside this autorun. So anything that I'm doing inside this autorun gets reran when this query changes. And then what I can do is say, what I'm not doing here, and what I need to do for observed changes is say, not re-render this entire view, but actually only re-render only add the added data into the scroll view. I'm not doing that here, and so if something changes, it actually re-renders that whole scroll view, but
So Meteor is calling Famous.
yeah, so Meteor, I'm using Meteor to do the data binding to then say, okay, we have posts in this array.
So like as far as like email tables, all that stuff, that all like done?
That's all.
Okay, so
You're not doing any
anything-
direct interaction with
anything
it.
like procedurally kind of generates that through.
Yeah, so you scrap the idea of div, of a table, of everything, and then you subscribe to this new front-end framework, which is Famous.
So,
Sorry.
so it's a little bit like EXT.js or something, where
Yeah, I've never used it, but I think so.
yeah.
Okay.
So if I'm going to create an element, let's say, and I have a website or something, and I take that content and show it on the surface.
Yeah, that's what I'm actually doing. These are, like, this is the header, for example. It's basically a handlebars template, and that gets rendered into the surface. So I guess you do have inside of surfaces, inside of your layouts, you do have the idea of tables. I didn't really think about that.
That's an abstraction away from removing DOM.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now, I think in the last release, you can restrict it to certain sub areas. So they released something like a famous carousel, which is, I can show you it. Their sort of objective right now is to appeal to that question. And obviously you don't want to, it's a big, why do I have so many? It's a big overhaul to say, let's rewrite this whole app in Famous. So what they've been tackling is taking some of the most popular jQuery plugins and saying, how can we implement this in Famous inside of a contained area? And the first one they've rebuilt is Carousel. And you can see here on National Geographic, they're using Famous surfaces inside of a normal web app to get that same GPU rendering and performance inside of a div, just using a Famous component. So you can achieve that isolation.
What are the browser restrictions on Famous? Can you use this through?
I haven't been using Famous. Yeah, it is a valid question. I've been strictly using Famous on the mobile web, so I haven't even dived into the limits of
The browser would have to
browser.
support Matrix 3, which is a newer 6.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's modern browsers, so I'd say stick to mobile web. If I was,
So it would have to be a very new mobile device as well, because even this is like a year and a half, 2-year-old tablet isn't rendering properly.
what type of tablet is it?
Nook,
So it's a Nook. Does that run on Android?
yeah.
Yeah. So what I came across that problem as well, and how you solve that problem is something called Crosswalk, which is developed by Intel. And it is a huge problem. Before KitKat, before 4.4, Android devices were packaged with a WebView which uses like Chrome 9 or something terrible that barely supports HTML5. So what Intel did was they developed Crosswalk, which packages the newest version of Chrome inside of your app, and then uses that as a WebView with Cordova. So, anyone have questions on that one? Yeah, I don't use that. No, I don't develop for the web. I develop for the mobile web. So.
Can you contrast this with like the Ionic framework? Or?
Yeah. So Ionic is Angular mixed with Cordova, right? You could use Famous together with something like Ionic to achieve more native feeling mobile experience. So you could use those integrated together.
Does Famous make any effort also to downgrade recently rather than not support?
I don't know. I haven't like really tested or played around with it, but I know their focus right now is mobile. So I doubt they've spent too many resources on it, but they did just get a huge round, 25 million. They're hiring a lot of developers, so I think in the short term to medium term, that's got to be one of their focuses.
I know when it first came out, like you went that demo and your fan shot through, like
Yeah.
it's off, like it was great. With the new release, I know it's supposed to like cut down quite a bit.
Yep.
What's like real world performance like on mobile or like a real application?
Mhm.
And maybe not even like super modern, like applications.
Yeah.
iPhones.
Yeah, I've done testing. I have like 3 old Android devices in my backpack even that I carry around, and because I have to consider those things. And I've had I'm not in my app. I'm not doing anything that intense, but they've had demos where you can run these crazy demos on old devices and handle it really well. So, yeah, mobile, it's actually, if I run an app on my mobile device, it's way higher performance than if I'm just using my browser, which is nuts. I don't know like the low level reasons for that.
Video. Is it easy to do like simplify video?
Yeah, so I haven't used the video surface, but they have something called a video surface.
Do you have an example?
I haven't used it, but yeah, I can probably find one.
It's really, it does a pretty rendering like that's,
Oh yeah, like how does that transit? Yeah, that'd be cool. I don't know. Let's see.
I'm working on that right now. My biggest problem is like put it into a Chrome app or something, and the behavior of video is different on the platform. Where sometimes it will load, on YouTube, and it loads a YouTube app,
Mhm.
kind of video. So it's like a quick time lapse of the view changes, and now you're getting full screen video, which is nice.
Yeah.
But you don't have control over it as much as you'd like. So I'm curious how they're handling.
Yeah, so actually that is more of a thing you want to handle. Are you using Cordova?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing you want to handle with Cordova. You can do,
There's a plugin there.
yeah, there's different properties in the web view itself where you can say, allow this video to play inside of the web view instead of opening up this third-party app, which I could show you, which is, it's just basically in your config.xml.
Yeah, I can figure that part out. I was just curious about the surfaces of
Yeah, the surface of video,
video.
I'm sure there's some good examples out there.
Transition from like a full screen down to, like it animates that, make it feel more native.
Yeah, I think that's something that you could achieve with things. I'm doing video on, I'm not doing, I'll probably have to face that problem here soon. I'm doing video, let's play some video here somewhere.
And possibly like later elements of the video.
Yeah, totally.
Seems like super,
Let's see if I have any video.
it feels like we've got a full screen video going, but really there's elements of it.
Yeah, you could definitely achieve that. I don't know if there's any video on these sections. Yeah.
I'm worried that it won't be doing it frame by frame.
No, it doesn't affect video like that.
3D transform stuff. Well, like, let's
Oh,
say-
when you're doing 3D transform?
Right, like, let's say I have like this opacity element on top of the video. How does that perform?
I mean, I have that in this app. I have like a play button that sits on top and different effects that sit on top and annotation, and I haven't seen a performance problem, but I'm also not like rotating video in 3D.
Right.
Cool, yeah, we can, so some other cool like side notes is they've just partnered with big companies like Intel, etc. And VentureBeat is actually one of the first larger companies to announce we're developing our entire mobile app in Famous. And I think I have just like a short clip of how that looks. And honestly, I wasn't that impressed, but there are some cool things that they're doing. Just sort of the scroll view, how you can do transitions in scroll view. Like, how would you ever achieve that in DOM without severely killing your performance?
So when you're getting set up, I noticed that you're using Sublime, and
Mhm.
I was wondering, does Famous have they released anything like a plugin or anything like that that enhances support for, like browsing components, like inline and whatnot?
Yeah, I think there are some third party. They haven't released anything themselves, but I've seen third party like autocomplete components and stuff. This is a remake of Yahoo's weather app in Famous, and if you can look, it feels native when he's dragging around. Famous also, anything you have to do with touch and multi-touch, Famous has the different event methods to handle multi-touch sliding with their multi-touch engine. So that's another thing.
Is there any way you can define your own touch events within Famous?
Yeah, so that's what's cool is you can get as fine-grained with your touch events as you want, which really is another benefit to using Famous rather than just your simple touch events that you get. So, see if there are any other cool demos here. And I would highly recommend just sitting down and going through these. If you really want to learn like the basics of positioning, handling events, and then you can go into, I think they're about to release a physics tutorial which goes through each of the different properties of the physics engine, which is pretty cool if you want to get into that. And another thing I've noticed here is a modifier. A modifier and transitionable. So a modifier is something that is on top of a surface. It's like the adjective of the noun. And so a modifier you can do like set position or set scale. It allows you to modify the surface in different ways. And the transitionable is how those modifiers can animate over time. So, and then the inputs is your multi-touch, and you can even go as far as building an app.
Kind of curious what like the memory footprint is.
Yeah, that's something that they're exploring, and there are a couple things low level issues with Famous at its core that are causing some memory problems, but they are aware of those, and that's in the roadmap to really optimize the memory in the browser. I follow like Famous and Meteor's GitHub every day and just kind of follow along. They're recently, I think they just released 3.0. If that's what version they're on, and that fixed a lot. That fixed like all the issues that I was having with scroll view and fast click. There was some issues with fast click not working on scroll view, and some other problems. And the most recent release is really stable. So.
Are they using semantic version?
Yeah, let's check it out.
Just to respond to those, part of those apps
Oh yeah, completely compatible. The one annoying thing about Famous when as a developer is before it was all in different repos. Each part of Famous was its own repo, and it was like hard to track issues and stuff. And one of the most recent things they've done is kind of combine it all into one repo, and you have one set of issues that you can follow and kind of follow along with. Another thing that they're doing right now is rebuilding basic components such as like a toggle switch or a slider. All these basic components you use in your apps. They're thinking like everyone's gonna have to remake these in Famous. So what they're doing is just remaking them themselves, and they're releasing a pack called Famous Components that does like, sort of the basic things you would be doing in your app. Any other questions?
How's Famous compare to things like WebGL?
So Famous, another cool thing about Famous is the fact that it can render to DOM, can render to divs. It can also render to Canvas and WebGL. So when WebGL becomes universally accepted, it can go from rendering like thousands of millions of particles to an unbelievable number of particles or surfaces. So WebGL is really exciting. Do you guys kind of get famous, what it's done and why it's so cool?
Actually wondering, if maybe we should try one of the examples, like the old examples or the style,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the mobile stuff. Because I was confused the first time I saw the mobile stuff come out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they can still do all that. I'm sure you can still do it.
Yeah, you can still do all that. The reason they're kind of moving in this mobile direction. Yeah, so the reason they're doing, there's not that many companies that want like 3D particles flying around in their website or app. So if you want to have it be adopted, then you need to have the slider and the scroll view and these things that we're actually using. And so that's sort of why they've taken a more mobile-focused approach. And then I think as applications develop, as we move into more of a futuristic applications, you'll start to see more things sort of flying around and multi-touch gestures and strands. And things is going to be really cool when that those trends sort of thing.
You can still do it in the sense that all I was saying, which I read inside of the
No, you can still use like a particle engine and do good down surfaces, but I haven't had that much experience with particle engine. I made a little thing where meteors fly around, but that's about it.
How bad, it feels like, so they basically program it like a desktop. They're not supporting IE, so you can't use us for any application.
Mm-hmm.
So in mobile, whenever you're a much bigger issue.
Yeah, totally. It's not honestly not that big a problem. If you're making a basic app, I'd say it only becomes a problem if you're doing something like insane, like entire video games for making Angry Birds and things, you might see some other issues. If you're doing something crazy, but if you're just developing an app that's displaying data and interacting between layouts and a social app or anything, 99% of
Don't
apps.
use it as a gaming framework, use it as a really app, like, still,
Yeah, I wouldn't even say don't use it as a game. If you want to use it as a game framework, do it. But know your limits. You guys did Harlem. But I think as those become more valid scales for us, you'll start to see game frameworks and games being made and games. And there actually are games. Yeah. It's like a I forget the name of it. It's funny, I didn't even like pull up my slides at all. But no, this one is not in the App Store. I think Scotch whiskey sounds good. I don't know if this is. Let me see. Wait. Floppy Bird, yeah, that's what it is. Thanks. Flappy Bird? Is it Flappy Bird or Floppy Bird? You just didn't know that? That's crazy.
No.
Cool.
Hey, my name is Tom Watson, and I'm a programmer for hire. Let's just get rid of that out of the way. So I came to Famous because I'm building a game, and I started building in HTML5. I really wanted to build an app that ran, or I wrote once and ran everywhere. And I quickly learned that's just not going to happen. And I tried, and it just didn't work. So I saw Famous and realized there's a good opportunity there to actually have that vision happen. And
We have to watch the whole thing, but basically you just made Flappy Birds.
yeah, I scored 3. So let's
So
take a
it's
look
like-
at it. I don't know if I'm hold this up here, but here we have it on the iPhone.
Maybe it is in the App Store, I don't know.
This is a 5S.
He's like, what's that? What's cool is if you're a famous developer, you can go, and he probably is, at the Famous Labs in San Francisco. You can just go there anytime you want and work with, you can take a couple of your developers and work with the core Famous team, and they'll sit there and help you and work with you on your app. And each Thursday they have a thing where the community kind of comes together and presents the cool things that people have made with Famous.
What time is that?
That's in San Francisco. And, oh, really? I don't know what time that's at. Yeah, I'll look it up. Famous, might be called Dev Shop maybe.
Anyway,
They just started that like 3 weeks
there's
ago.
a famous bird, and realizing
So it's
the.
Famous Bird. There's a lot of cool projects being developed in Famous. If you go on their blog and check it out. Let me see if I have any other cool things. Oh, this is a cool. This guy actually made his splash page, landing page, in Famous. So there are people using it on the web, and I don't know how this. He probably does his own type of degradation. And he's making this whole video editing app that's actually looks really cool. And he's using it, Famous, to develop the whole thing. So.
Just demo, I think.
Yeah, this is just a demo, but I don't know. But it's cool, like, when you're scrolling and playing with it, actually it doesn't feel like you're using a normal web scroll, it kind of clicks, which other websites do. But it's kind of cool to see projects being developed that are exciting and famous. And another cool example is this reimagining of a light box. And this is one of their earlier demos where when I click one of these, this is made for like a larger browser, but when I click one of these elements, it actually flips and rotates in 3D rather than just popping in like a bootstrap modal, which is kind of getting, I think, yeah, played out, you know.
Is that kind of transition built into it, or is that something?
Yeah, so that transition is using, there's a couple different modifiers going on here, and one is the scroll view is being modified back and sort of like opacity. And then you have this flip, they have this flip controller that does the surface flipping and applies two different textures, one each side. And that's a component that's built in. And it's doing other things like, it's using a spring as it comes back in, the scroll view, you're gonna see it bounce. And all these things kind of playing together, the different icons, animating in, that's what is really gonna define modern applications going forward, is number one, transitions, physics, and just like the overall feel of the front end. So, yeah, Famous is exciting for a lot of people out there. Yeah.
So you mentioned Famous can't really use the common manipulation, so that means if you get another framework doing that, they just won't work together at all.
What kind of?
If you're just doing like jQuery slide up or something.
So I'm not saying you can't do it, but you can do it. I don't know if you want to do it, but yeah, you can use DOM manipulation. I can do a jQuery effect, or you still can do anything you want because it's so loud.
It would be like the environment, like you might protect and jQuery and say, okay,
Yeah.
you can technically do it, but why would you?
Yeah, exactly.
It's more like if you want to like advance something on the app. Something that is using jQuery.
So here's a good example. Like, say inside one of these surfaces, I want to use this jQuery plugin that I have. I don't want to rewrite in Famous. You can do that.
But would you be able to like holistically, jQuery can do this stuff, this thing, Famous can do the same thing?
Yeah, totally. If you want to animate something with Matrix 3D, like low level, I would say you just, at that point, you just want to use Famous. If you're actually animating, just use Famous. But If you want to do like a jQuery slider inside of this surface, then there's nothing in Famous that restricts you from doing that.
I mean, you would still have the same structure, so base isn't going to change structure.
Inside the surfaces, no. So inside the surface, if I want to have this H1 and this H2, that DOM is completely contained. And if you want to animate those with jQuery inside there, do whatever you want, yeah. But the whole structure of this whole layout in Famous is that DOM structure is controlled. And it's as unnested as possible. So it's very flat. And there's some performance benefits to talk about. Any other questions?
Just to make that fit, I have just a static HTML page, that's all the divs and everything, and all the, I just lay things on top of it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it makes sense.
Kind of like what the National Geographic was supposed to be, right?
Yeah, so that's more in like an isolated engine of Famous. Trying to think of how you take a static page and then Famous. I don't know how I don't know how to do that because yeah. Yeah, so when Famous, sort of like the initialization of Famous is this, I'm just initializing it in my Celestial package, but Famous the engine is what is running everything, and this, so you do like you do engine.create context, and that is sort of like, okay, this div is, or the body is now the context in which Famous has control, and you can do, and then everything from there on out is added into that engine, or that main context. So I'm adding, you could add surfaces into this engine, into this context. What I'm doing is adding just a base layout, and then from there I'm adding stuff into the base layout. So I guess I've missed a lot of stuff, but add is a big function where you add surfaces to views, or you add surfaces to layout, or you can add a layout to a context, and basically you're creating your hierarchical like div structure that you would have, what you're doing in JavaScript. So I'm not using Blaze at all. Well, I'm using Blaze to only do the data. So I'm doing like all my Blaze manually. Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So what I'm doing is, I'm not using, I am using Blaze, sorry. I'm using Blaze manually. For example, here, if an artifact is an audio element, I am rendering that template with the data into just this div in JavaScript, and then I'm setting the content of that surface to be that rendered div. So I'm using templates and then sort of injecting them into my Famous surfaces. But there is another way. There's a Famous. There is a package. It was called Famous Components. I think it changed because now there's no Famous Components. But you can use Blaze and use Famous inside of Blaze. I just didn't like how helpful it was. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. I haven't. I can explain like I should probably get into that more because I think there's an application there, but I haven't.
How long have you been using Famous?
Been using Famous for about 4 months, and I kind of dove in pretty hardcore into it. But I'd say it takes a little bit. It's a learning curve for sure, because you're like, okay, I want to scroll, and then you have to figure out how all the steps along the way to get just to scroll. But then once you get it, then you can start defining those key properties. But there's definitely a learning curve, and I don't know if everyone has the time to learn that. But.
And the physics on this, is there reflect to me, like, you had an engineering, I don't know if this side of here, could like these pixels affect those moves?
Ooh. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sure someone could tell you, but that'd be cool though. Yeah, I'm not sure how far they've taken the physics engine. I think it's more right now, just like collision, sort of the basics physics engine, but it'd be cool to see them take it further. You know?
I don't want to yell about that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Any demos for indicators of degree?
Yeah, I think there's some good demos out there. I can't say it's good, but we'll see.
Hi there, my name is
All right.
Steve Hall. I've been here at Famous for the last few weeks, and my project has been integrating Famous's framework with a data visualization library called D3JS. And this is a project where by combining the power of D3, which gives you a way of taking data and translating into geometrical representations of that information, you can create basic charts, you can create sophisticated data visualizations in Famous, and then also create customized animations that are based and driven by data tips. And one of the nice things that, and these are all surfaces, what D3 does is give the ability to take some data and actually figure out how to lay out these bars and the size of the different elements on here. But everything that you're looking at is really just Famous surfaces. And then the other thing that Famous allows you to do is to create a series of these things. And right now, these are just showing the same data being loaded over and over again. But this is a really powerful way to put a series of charts together into a single presentation. Or visualization is called hierarchical color-coded investment activity in New York. I'm looking at hierarchical information.
Yeah, really cool stuff. And I honestly don't even think he's really getting that deep into what's possible. I think it's going to be really cool when we start to have really 3D physical particles flying around. It's pretty cool.
Bring those together and look at it by the type of drive, whether it's
But,
You got the demo with Angular. I've seen that one. I didn't ask it, but I've seen it.
yeah. I haven't used it with Angular, but it looks pretty. I like the way you can just use it within your standard Angular template. Or, yeah, it looks pretty. It actually looks a lot easier to do with that than Famous stuff. Yeah, it'd be cool to try that out. Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have any other questions? I would honestly just recommend going into Famous University if you want to learn how to develop in Famous. But I hope hope I gave you a good overview of maybe what Famous is and how you can start to apply it or think about applying it. Sweet.
This is the part where we usually go around and introduce ourselves. I think we have a lot of people here. And when do we have room until, Kevin? 9:30? Or 9:30? So I'm going to pass on it tonight, the introductions, guys. Come to the bar if you